Let's talk about some of my favorite female authors writing in fantasy and science fiction. These are all authors that I have read and love. I was talking with some friends recently, and of course, when our favorite genres are science fiction and fantasy, this is what we primarily read. It is so easy to have TBRs full of male authors and to only read from male authors. And personally, I want to experience all there is to author. I want to experience the breadth and depth of the human experience through fiction, and the one way to do that is by reading from authors from various backgrounds. So today we are going to be talking about some female authors I absolutely love, starting with the queen herself, Robin Hobb. I have read 5 Robin Hobb books, and I absolutely loved all of them. Robin Hobb, oh my gosh. I don't know how to describe a Robin Hobb book. Her books are amazing, okay? So if you start reading Hobb for the first time, trust the process, okay? Whenever I started Assassin's Apprentice, I almost DNF'd this book halfway through, which is kind of crazy to think about considering later, whenever I was reading Ship of Magic, which I also DNF'd twice, I was in the middle of Ship of Magic and going, I am reading one of the greatest fantasy authors. How can I go on and read more fantasy after this? This is peak. This is it. I already found it. And then I proceeded to really not read much more Robin Hobb, which I'm going to blame on the fact that I don't want to peak too soon and I want to continue to enjoy fantasy. But I mean, it's totally that and not the fact that I'm really bad at continuing series. Okay, but back to Robin Hobb. So you can start in 2 places with Hobb. You can start with Assassin's Apprentice, or you can start with Ship of Magic. Both of them, trust the process. It gets better about, well, this one, definitely the halfway point. Like, I couldn't put it down after that. Like, you hit a point where it's just like, oh my gosh, I need to know what happens. And that was kind of the same with Ship of Magic, except that happened much earlier in Ship of Magic for me. So, Assassin's Apprentice is about... How do I describe Hobb? I don't know that I've ever actually described a Robin Hobb book before on my channel. Like, this is terrible. Like, I'm literally sitting here saying she's one of the greatest authors I've ever read. I obviously don't talk about her enough. Okay, so Assassin's Apprentice, we're following this young boy throughout his life as he is the bastard of the current king, or he's a bastard of the royal family anyway. And they have taken the keep your enemies close kind of approach, and they keep him around, and they decide that he's going to work for them as the royal assassin. And he doesn't really have a choice in the matter, and he's like growing up in the palace surrounded by people who have complicated emotions about him because he's the royal bastard. It's really not the best childhood for a kid growing up, but he pretty much grows up in the first book, and then the next 2 books, well, the next book he's still pretty young, but like we continue to follow him as he ages, so it's like really a long saga of his life. And he has 2 magics. He has the wit and the skill, and the wit is where he can talk to animals, he can converse, he can communicate with animals. We also get one of the best animal companions in these books. And we have the skill, which is like you can communicate with people over long distances. I guess it's early telephone. It's more complicated than that and way cooler than that. I told you, I'm bad at describing Robin Hobb books. I need to work on my pitch. And then we have Ship of Magic. So Ship of Magic is this family saga, and we're following so many different people. We're following multiple perspectives, and there's these live ships that the family owns that whenever 3 generations die aboard the ship absorbs all of their memories and comes to life, and then is like the best ship because it has the memories of all of the previous captains and knows these waters super well. It's one of the fastest ships on the ocean. We're also following the family that owns the ship. There is disputes over who should take over the ship once the current captain dies. So we're following people who have actually inherited the ship and those who thought they should have inherited the ship. We're also following other people in the village that they are at. The village is going through a lot of change. There's a lot of like cultural disruption and economic disruption in this village, and we're following a pirate whose mission it is to capture a live ship. So much going on in these books, but also just like deep character studies into why do these characters do these things. You know, just getting inside the head and just like really following them through every moment in their life. In a similar vein, we have Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. This is another Trust the Process book, because about halfway through, now I was enjoying this book. Like, I enjoyed it from chapter 1, but about halfway through, I was like, you know, this is a really long story. There's nothing really compelling me to keep reading. And then I kept reading and I hit this point where I could not put it down. I had to know what happens next. So this is definitely a Trust the Process book. This is following 2 magicians in an England that used to have magic, but magic has since died out. And these 2 are the very first magicians to bring magic back to England. At first we get this partnership between them, which quickly evolves into a rivalry between them. They have very different ideas about how magic should work and how you should use magic. And one of them ends up summoning a fairy, and fairies are just agents of chaos, and the fairy just like goes around England and more parts of the world and just creates chaos in his wake. And oh my gosh, there's so much. This is also just like a character study of these characters as they work on their rivalry and then work through their rivalry. And I have an entire dedicated reading vlog where you can see my ups and downs with this book. But if you've not tried Susanna Clarke, this is the only Susanna Clarke book that I've read, and I need to read Apprentice because I've heard so many people rave about it. And after reading Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell, yes, I would probably love Apprentice. Next, we have All Systems Red by Martha Wells. This is a science fiction book, and it is very short, so you have no excuses not to read it, and it is so entertaining. This is about Murderbot, the protagonist of our story, which is a robot. This is a security unit. Murderbot's mission is to protect the humans that he's sent to protect. But Murderbot has other plans. Murderbot has hacked their governor module and decided that they just want to watch TV. They want to sit around and watch soap operas and not actually do their tasks because their tasks are bored. But Murderbot is a big softie, and whenever people get in trouble, they still come to the rescue very begrudgingly. Murderbot is very antisocial. There's also a reason they're named Murderbot, which this book goes into, and it's kind of, they're not remembering their everything clearly, and this story, like the saga, goes into more of the history of Murderbot, and you know, maybe their what caused their namesake is not quite what it seems and just at first blink. But I don't know, this book's just so much fun. And there's a TV show coming out, which I'm not sure if I'm going to watch right away, but I'm definitely going to watch it at some point. Next we have Do You Dream of Terra 2? This is another science fiction book, and I read this book, I finished it 2 months ago. And I am still thinking about this book. That is how much I love Do You Dream of Terra 2. This is the story of astronauts who are being sent to Terra 2, which is a 23-year mission. It is a one-way trip. They are sent to set up a base on Terra 2 and prepare it for future humans arriving. And they are the very first ones on this mission. Everything should be fine. Terra 2 should basically be like a second Earth. And this is about the astronauts and their journey. It is about them mentally and physically preparing for this mission. It is about the mental toll it takes on them. They are leaving the only Earth that they ever know behind in hopes of a bright future ahead. But they're also going to be with the same small group of astronauts on this spaceship for 23 years. And yes, they can send messages back to Earth, but there's always a delay. If anything goes wrong on the spaceship, there's going to be a point where they're too far away for Earth to continue to send help to the astronauts, and they have to be self-sufficient. They have to rely on each other and form team bonds. And this book is about the journey. This book's about the journey. There's a quote from this book. I'm going to see if I can pull it up. I'm going to read a quote from this book. It's just one of the many themes this book covers. There is no frontier left to discover down there. Almost every inch of Earth has been trodden under 1 million feet, photographed hundreds of times. But to be alone is divine. To trek through lightless craters, leave the first and sole footprints on Martian mountains, tear through the hard vacuum of space unfettered by the sticky mass of humanity we left behind. There is only yourself, first and last. Meet him with courage. Meet him with gladness. There is only one. There is love to be found, adventure to be had. I just love the exploration in this book. And like, seriously, there's certain things in this book that it brought up that I'm still thinking about months later and going, oh my gosh, just, oh my gosh. Okay. If you've not read Do You Dream of Terra 2, go read it. If you have read it, please chat with me. Also, I will be making a video yelling about this book, a dedicated review video, because I love it so much. And then I will discuss its themes in more depth in that video. Back to fantasy. I am going to talk about Emma Törzs. So I read the book Inkblood Sister Scribe, which is like, it's set in our contemporary world, but with magic. It is a magical library story, which there's only a handful of magical library stories that actually work for me. And this is one of them. I loved it. Okay, we literally start with one of the books in the magical library killed the librarian. And that's the start of the book. And we follow the book. We follow the perspective. Well, we follow 3 perspectives, but one of them is the person who inherits the magical library. And she realizes there's so much more that they don't understand about the magical library, and they're trying to understand more about it. We also follow her sister, who has literally been told by her parents that she has to travel every single year. She cannot stay in the same place because people are after her, and if she stays in the same place, she will be captured. And then we follow a third perspective. He doesn't come in until like later in the book, and he's also someone who's inherited a magical library and maybe has more answers than everyone else, but he's also basically working for the antagonists. There's a little bit of a mystery thriller element to the story as they're trying to uncover the secrets and the plots going on in this world. And it was a fun time, and I feel like I've not heard very much about it on BookTube. Next, I'm going to talk about T. Kingfisher because, oh my gosh, T. Kingfisher I absolutely love. I have read 4 T. Kingfisher books, and like, honestly, 2 of them were kind of mid, but like, I still enjoyed them. And then 2 of them were just speaking to my soul. So my favorite T. Kingfisher books are A Sorceress Comes to Call, which I have a dedicated review for this one. That I love it so much. So we follow 2 characters. One of them is an old spinster, and the other character is this girl who grows up very isolated, and her mother is a sorceress, and her mother is like very controlling to the point that like her mother can control her limbs. She can make her sit still for hours without blinking or anything. And this girl finally gets the chance to leave the home that she grew up in, but she leaves with her mother, and they go spend time at the old spinster's house. And the old spinster realizes something's not quite right with the situation, but she's not exactly sure what's going on. And it's the story of finding courage and healing but it's also like a dark fairy tale story that feels almost like a Victorian story. It's brilliant. I loved it. It's like Jane Austen with some horror elements thrown in. It was brilliant. I loved it. The other T. Kingfisher book that I absolutely love is A Wizard's Guide to Defensive Baking. This, we're following a young girl who is a bakery wizard, and the things that she can do, the magic she can do is just making the best baked goods, the best sourdough starter, the best fluffiest muffins and scones and everything you want. And the book starts with her finding someone murdered in her bakery, and she soon gets swept up in this plot against the kingdom, against wizards and in the kingdom, against magic users in the kingdom. She initially just goes into hiding, but then she also realizes that she's gonna step up and help as much as she can with her bakery goods, as in making gigantic bread golems to go fight against the evils that are coming for the kingdom. And I just love this book. It is so fun and so creative. Moving back to science fiction, I'm going to talk about The Practice, the Horizon, and the Chain by Sofia Samatar. So this is the only Sofia Samatar book that I've read, but I want to read more by this author because I love this one. Oh my gosh, the writing is beautiful. This is definitely a book that like also just like makes you think about life, about society, about everything. So we're following two characters. One of them is from, so this system, this society has like very like class system, and our character, one of the characters we're following is from the lowest class. He's from the Chained, and the Chained basically do society's dirty work, and they're literally chained, and every now and then they decide to take someone from the Chained and elevate them to the educated class. And our main character is chosen, and he has to go through this terrible adjustment, and then also realizing like all of the problems with the elevated educated class and some of the things that are wrong there. And we're also following a professor who's basically the caretaker of this person whenever they bring someone up from the Chain Society. She is a caretaker to, you know, help them adjust to this new good life that they've been given. And they both have a lot of reckoning to do, and they both are determined to make the world better, to make their society better. And yes. The back of this says, together the boy and the woman will embark on a transformative journey to grasp the design of the chains that fetter them both and the key to breaking them free. Next I have Becky Chambers, which, oh my gosh. Becky Chambers is one of the earlier adult fiction books that I read, and I read A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, and I fell in love. There's not much of a plot in this book, but I just had to know what happened next with these characters, and I needed to keep reading to know more, and I fell in love. And I've read all of the Wayfarers books, and The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet and Record of a Spaceborne Few are my favorites. They can be read as standalone. They all take place in the same world, but we follow different characters in each one, and they have their own story arc. And by story arc, I mostly mean theme arc. This is a book about themes and characters. In this book, we are following the crew of the Wayfarer. It is a multi-species crew. And we are following a human who is from a human colony who joined this crew and is getting used to working on a multi-species crew. She's learning about the cultures and the ways of life of the other species. We literally go to pretty much every species homeworld or a planet like a homeworld and learn more about them. And like, this is a book about finding home, about finding belonging. our main character is looking for that, and several of the crew members, I guess, are looking for that in their own way. And this is also a book that, like, people find those answers differently. Particularly, it's a similar theme. It's a very different way of telling the theme, though. Like, I guess a different exploration of the theme in Record of a Spaceborne Few, but like in that one, it's very obvious. Like, every character finds home and belonging in their own way, and the answer of what does home mean is different for each of the characters. And that's maybe true to a lesser extent in this one, but I would say that's also true in this one. How else do I describe this book? In this one in particular, some of the characters have secrets, and you know, they're going on a very intense mission that is like very far away. It's a long way to a small angry planet, and they have to contend with working as a team whenever they don't like each other, whenever problems arise, and this mission will test them and make them lay bare all of their secrets that they're keeping from each other, and test the bonds of this crew, and test how far they're willing to go for other members of the crew, even those that they don't care for. Next we have His Majesty's Dragon by, oh no. Okay, I think this happens like every time I talk about these books, and I should know that by now. But here we are, once again. His Majesty's Dragon by Naomi Novik is one of my favorite dragon books ever. Temeraire is my favorite dragon ever. Oh my gosh. I love this series. So this follows Lawrence and Temeraire, and their bond is awesome. Lawrence is a naval captain who is happy being a naval captain, but he accidentally becomes a dragon rider whenever he captures a French ship, and the dragon egg hatches. And our dragon is very, very inquisitive. This is set during the Napoleonic War, and our dragon likes the idea of fighting in wars. But our dragon also just has a lot of questions, and he's like, well, why do we do it this way? Why do we have to listen to commanders? Why can't we just do our own thing? That cow looks good. I want to go eat it. And why do I have to pay the farmer? And all of the things. Like, Temeraire is very curious about the world and just does not accept easy answers. And Lawrence grew up in like a very rigid society, I guess you could say, and maybe it's been a long time, or maybe he's not really ever thought about these things, and being bonded to Temeraire and having this love and affection for this dragon that's growing up in his care, but also just like challenging him to see the world different. And I love it so much. The Temeraire series, as you can see, it's back here because it's one of my all-time favorites. Okay, so I'm also going to talk about The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang, or Rebecca Kuang. See, this is also a historical fantasy. Maybe I should do a video sometime about like historical fantasy that I love. This is based in China. It's basically the Sino-Japanese War, except fantasy version of it. We are following, oh my gosh, I've forgotten how to talk about this book. It's been a minute. This is a polarizing book, but it's one that I loved. And some people like prefer the first half or prefer the second half. I loved this book the whole way through. So this book, we're following a girl from a poor village. She gets the opportunity to go to this military academy. She's had to work hard for this, and she's like not giving up this opportunity. And she goes to this military academy, and it's kind of a magical school fantasy setting for the first half of the book, and then the second half of the book is just war. And it's kind of an abrupt shift because war can be rather abrupt, and I loved both settings in this book. Yes, we get a tonal shift. Yes, we get like a shift in goals and everything, but I thought it was really, I loved it. It was well done, and I loved it. I don't know if I can explain why this book worked for me so much, but I was listening to, I experienced this book first on audio, and listening to the audio, I just felt so immersed right away in the story. And this is also a story, like, whenever you start it, you think this is the typical hero's journey. This seems just like your hero from, you know, the farm boy who gets chosen, goes to this like prestigious place, learns all the things, battles the big bad. But by the end of this book, you realize this is not really the hero's journey. We're not following a hero's journey. In fact, like, we're following a corruption arc. And yeah, I love that twist on it. While we're still on historical fantasy, let's talk about The Adventures of Amina al-Sirafi by Shannon Chakraborty. This is the only Shannon Chakraborty book that I've read, and I need to read all of the others because I loved this one so much. So this was also one that I experienced on audio, and I loved the experience. The narrators give a performance, and it was a fun time. And that's a good way to describe this book. It is about a retired pirate who gets conned, blackmailed into going out on one more mission for a crewmate's family, friend, somebody. It's for, you know, for the crew. They have to go out on this mission one more time. The first half of the book, our protagonist, Amina al-Sirafi, is gathering the crew back together, and some of the crew is really happy in retirement, and they're like, you know, I'm living an honorable life now. Are you serious? We're doing this again? I've given that up. And there's other crew members that are like, yes, I'm ready to do the pirating. This book is set in the 12th century Middle East, and I really found the historical notes at the end of this book inspiring, eye-opening, all of the things. Shannon Chakraborty talks about the research that she did writing this book. She gives multiple sources that you can go read on your own if you're interested in learning more about this topic. But she also talks about, well, first off, it's hard to find first-person accounts of pirates because pirates were kind of doing illegal things, and it wouldn't be good to be writing down all of their illegal actions in case they were getting caught. And secondly, you know, there's things in history, you know, we have discovered things, we think this is the way history was, and we might make a discovery later that changes our perspective, that gives us new insight, and maybe changes the way that we currently view history. And, you know, in her talking about that in the historical note, I just found really insightful. And last but definitely not least, Untethered Sky by Fonda Lee. This is, again, the only book I've read by Fonda Lee, and I need to read more of them. That's a theme. Anyway, Untethered Sky is a novella that is awesome. It is about this girl who her entire family is killed by manticores, and she decides to become a manticore hunter because she wants revenge. And this is a story about revenge and grief and processing grief and learning to let go. And it's good. It's really good. Whenever our main character becomes a manticore hunter, they hunt manticores with rocks, which are these giant birds that the manticore hunters ride, that they bond with, and we see a lot of the bond between our main character and her rock, and we see them going out and hunting manticore as our main character continues on this vengeful quest and also continues working through her grief. Yes, go read it. So those are some of the fantasy and science fiction books I have read by female authors that I absolutely loved. If you have any recommendations for me, let me know in the comments, and I hope to see you in another video. Happy reading!